Hey everyone, welcome back to Poplar Preparedness. Today we're talking kind of in follow-up to my previous video earlier this week about forgiving the unprepared. I was mostly addressing in that video letting go in your heart of the anger, the resentment, the bitterness towards people who have hurt you, who have insulted you, who have spurned your care and concern for them. And as I said in that video, it is not so much about what you're going to actually do for them. Just forgiving them does not mean that you're going to pay every utility bill that they ever have in the rest of their life. That would be absurd. And that does not mean that you will cater to their every whim and every need during a catastrophic situation either. So, but I did ask you to seriously consider what you really will be willing to do in a catastrophe. I mean, are you really going to turn away your family members? Are you going to really turn away your neighbors, friends, and community members empty-handed? Are you going to watch the little children with the families walk away hungry and really not do anything about it? And just being honest with yourself. And if you're not going to be able to do that, then make sure that you stock up enough so that you have enough to give to them, you know, whatever you're going to give, and also for your family, right? So in this video, I want to talk more about that giving, because it seems like so many folks have this on-off mentality where either you just give willy-nilly and you have no responsibility whatsoever, and you just give whatever they ask for, and that's what you're going to do. And if you start giving to somebody, you're going to be responsible for them for the rest of your life. And no, I've worked in conflict zones. I did disaster relief. I was trained to do relief work. That's a whole nother story how that relief project fell apart. It's quite a story, actually. But when we did disaster relief and such, sometimes we weren't responding to a disaster. We were responding to people who were very, very hungry because there just wasn't enough food and there wasn't enough work in the villages. And so what we did was we did work for food programs. And that's something you guys need to think about too, is if you have lots and lots of hungry people and you want to help some, but you can't help all, maybe what you need to do is you need to hire some people to work for food. That will increase perhaps your production in your garden so that you can produce more food so that you can feed more people, which is huge. And that's actually not, it could in the end actually be a benefit to you rather than even drawing down your supplies. So I mean, that leads to the question of maybe instead of stockpiling more food, what you need to do is you need to be thinking through what kind of work projects you could have them do. If you have garden beds planned out that could be dug up and seeded for the next season and stuff like that, even though you don't have the time right now to get to them, but by planning them out, you know that you'd have that work for families who really need the food. And in that case, it's a win-win. You're helping them, but then they're also helping you, and they're helping themselves because you'll have that food to be able to help support them. So, but it also really weeds out the freeloaders, right? The people who maybe are getting food elsewhere for free. Why would they come and work for you for food as well when they can just go get free food somewhere else? So, but if you're just giving out free food, I mean, why wouldn't they come with empty hands to your house, right? So being tough-minded and being intelligent about how you're giving is critical. So work for food is a huge thing. It weeds out a lot of people who aren't willing to do the hard work, who aren't really desperate. And then it also will allow you to find the people that are actually going to be able to help you, and people that you're actually going to want to be in a relationship with. You're going to want to be in a work relationship with. Another thing to do is if you know people in your community who are desperately in need, perhaps they're handicapped, perhaps they're homebound, and they're not capable of working, and you know that they don't have any family in the area, how do you take care of them? Well, we'll go back to the Depression and we can look at some of the things that were done then. I've also seen this done overseas too, where you put together a bag of groceries, you put together food, and then in the dead of night, you put it on their doorstep and you ring the doorbell and you run. Or you have your kid do it. You know, for those of us who aren't so much in running shape and we don't want to be mistaken for something else. But you can anonymously give food to those who really are in need, people who really need it. Or perhaps family members that you know really need it. You can anonymously give your family members food and supplies without actually telling them that it's you. They can suspect it's you, but they don't have to know or ever have it fully confirmed that it's you. So that, you know, when they come to ask you for food, you just say, I don't have any food for you. Is that a truthful statement? I don't have any food that I can spare for your family. Is that a truthful statement? If it's truthful, then you can say it, right? It doesn't mean you don't have any food in your house. But if you're going to need that food, thinking through how much food you guys need, part of that calculation you need to be considering is, I know a lot of people are going to say, well, how can I know how much food I need because I don't know how long the crisis will last? I'd say that I would strongly suggest you change your thinking, because if there's going to be a long-term situation, whether it's a slow-burning situation like a depression, or whether it's a fast-flaming, the whole system comes crashing down and we're all back to horses and buggies and wagons and stuff, then you should be thinking about how much food do I need in order to get me to the place where I can become self-sufficient in my gardening and through my relationships with other people who are growing their own food. So that's you're either growing your own food or raising your own food, or you are providing very valuable services and resources to people who are growing their own food. So if you get really good at blacksmithing or doing some other specialized trade that lots of people who are growing food around your area they need, then you might not need to grow quite so much food because, you know, you're helping them grow food. But how long is it going to take you to become self-sufficient or, you know, able to bring in as much food as you guys are consuming over the course of a year? And if you're planning on ramping up your gardens and ramping up animals and stuff like that, you should kind of be crunching the numbers and kind of like, how long would it take for me, how many seasons would it take for me to be able to grow my food supply, my garden, up to the point where I can feed myself, feed my family, feed the people that are in my group, right? And once you know that, that's a much more definite number, isn't it? That's a definite number. I know how long it would take me to ramp up food production here at my homestead in order to become self-sufficient. I'm missing a couple components, so I'm working on getting those components. Meat rabbits are next on the agenda for sure, but my garden outside, it's grown enough that I have the seeds in the garden and in my house now to grow enough food next season to feed me for a full year, which is great. But I won't have that food until next fall. Next fall about this time. So clock ticking, I would need a full year's worth of food to get to that. So that's how much I need to have stockpiled. So however much beyond that I have stockpiled is what I could share, assuming that my homestead, my garden, that there's a good yield, there's a good crop, right? So those are some considerations to take into thought and to calculate. But getting back to how you give. So work for food, anonymous giving. Also, there's another model which we used overseas a good bit, which was basically where it's like work for food, but it's slightly different. Inner city missions and other programs will do the same kind of thing, where you're basically paying them as they hit benchmarks in increasing their production and benefiting themselves. So the idea would be like you'd give them some seeds and you give them some food. And you say, this is what you need to do for your garden. You need to go tear up a whole bunch of land. You need to rototill it down. You need to get it, chopped up. You need to get some manure in there, fertilizer in there. You need to plant your seeds by such and such a date. And you need to start watering it and start seeing how it's going. Now, you might go visit them after a few weeks and go see how the work is progressing. And if you get out there and you see, instead of the X amount of land torn up, you see a small patch of land torn up, or you don't see any at all, and they're just like, yeah, I meant to do that, and then you just don't give them any more food. Or perhaps you don't give them any more food until they get the work done. Because the idea is, I'm going to provide you food because I care about you, but you need to do your part of getting yourself self-sufficient, because this isn't going to be a continuing situation. I'm investing in you to help you get up to speed, but if you're not going to take this and run with this, I'm going to go take this down to someone else, and I'm going to help them. Help someone who actually is going to receive the help and do something with it. Now, also, beyond these things, I think it's very important to say, if you calculate and crunch the numbers and you look at what you have and you're saying, I just have just enough for us, then I would say you should still be helping other people. Morally, I would suggest you need to help other people. Some of you may just, I don't know anything to the world and I don't need to help anyone with anything, and, I'm not going to change your mind, and thanks for watching anyway. Just be nice in the comment section, right? I am who I am. But helping other people doesn't always mean you have to use your tangible resources. Sometimes it's your time. Sometimes it's listening to them and helping them process emotionally and spiritually and mentally what's going on with them, right? Helping them decompress, inviting someone in to have a coffee, and you're using some coffee up, but letting them vent because they're dealing with some people over there and they need someone else to vent on from the outside. Maybe in your homestead situation, you need to get away to a friend's house and you need to drink a coffee with them and you need to vent a little bit with them. Now, be careful about that, not gossiping and such like that, where you're tearing other people down behind their backs. But perhaps you need to be a friend to somebody, and maybe that doesn't mean that you're sharing all sorts of food with them or other resources because you're tight as it is, but maybe that means you're helping them make wise choices or process things. If you have been in preparedness for a bit, you've been around, you've listened to a lot of people, you probably will have some pretty good advice for them. If they're just starting to wrap their head around the crisis and what to do about it, and you can walk them through, if I were in your shoes, this is what I would do. I do X, I do Y, I do Z, and then I do A, B, C. And this is what I do, and this is why I do it like this. If you want me to show you kind of how to do a few things, you can shadow me, and I'll show you how to do some of these processes, and go ahead and do these things, right? If you're doing that, if you're giving advice, if you're teaching people, if you're training people, you're using your time, which is a valuable resource, but it's not necessarily one of those resources that you have a finite supply of in your basement or in your pantry, right? You might actually have the luxury of having a bit of time that you can spend with some people to train them. And so advice, wisdom, if you have things like seeds that you've stored up, perhaps you can't stockpile enough food for people, but you can maybe stockpile seeds so that you can give to them and say, listen, I wish I had more for you, but these, if you can use these properly, these can feed you in the future, right? And that's huge. And just because you're helping someone this much doesn't mean you owe them this much, right? Just because you're helping them somewhat doesn't it's not an all or nothing game. It's not like you have to either feed them for the rest of their life or you have to give them nothing and tell them to go on their way, right? We can do this, and we do this all the time, where you help someone in some way, and that's as much as you can do for them. This is how life works. And if you are dealing with people who will take your kindness and come back with weapons to take the rest of your stuff from you, you need better friends. You need to figure out who those people are earlier and have nothing to do with them. Okay? Most people around you are going to be reasonably level-headed and moral. Hopefully, unless you live in California or something like that. I know some places in California is great and wonderful and surrounded by wonderful people. I understand that. I'm talking about certain places, of course. But generally speaking, the majority of the people around you are going to be relatively level-headed people that you can help and you are going to be able to deal with as adults. Hopefully. And you look for those people and help those people. That's what I'm saying. Also, if you don't have enough to just give away, maybe what you need to think about doing is trading. Trading or making resources available. So selling resources for other things. You know, perhaps you can trade. Someone is putting a whole bunch of seed in the ground, right? And they're planning on harvesting, and you know they're hardworking, and you've seen the field, and you see that they're really going to be having a harvest at the end of the season, but they don't have enough food to get to the end of the season, right? Maybe you can trade them food now for tangible items like, you know, gold or silver or something like that, with the understanding that you're then going to use that gold and silver to buy part of the produce back, right? So things like that, you can maybe make trades. You can provide some services like that, and that could really save people's butts. And of course, in situations like this, it's not necessarily all or nothing. I mean, it's not like the whole system is going to collapse completely or it's going to be completely fine. There's a lot of room in between. The Great Depression was a hard time for a lot of people. Are your food preps going to be useful in a Great Depression scenario? Yes. Is your garden or your animals going to be a huge asset when you're going through a Great Depression type situation? Yes, absolutely. In hyperinflation, are those things going to be huge assets? Absolutely. All the things that you know how to do for yourself and you can actually get done that you can't afford to pay someone else for, those are things that are going to be huge assets for you. So those are some thoughts. Hopefully you're kind of reading my mind here a little bit and my heart of what I'm talking about. How can we help people in a disaster situation, in an SHTF situation, in a depression-like situation, or even just like a grid down few weeks situation? How can we help people without putting ourselves in a real bind, compromising our security, or by creating dependency, of them upon us? We don't want any of those things, of course. But I will say this, and I've said this before, if you sit there on a mountain of supplies and you turn every single person that comes to you asking for help away, they will remember that for the rest of their lives. So even if you don't care a lick about those people, if you piss off every single person in your entire county, and things get better, you will be the black sheep for the rest of your life. That's how community works. What goes around comes around. And most places I've seen SHTF situations around the world, community still exists. And if you just flaunt it in front of the community and you just basically give them middle finger, two birds up, and say, ha, they might just come after you. Maybe just out of spite. that happens. Welcome to true SHTF. When you tick off a lot of people and they get really mad at you, you go straight to the top of the hit list. So hopefully you hear my moral arguments, but if not, hear that argument and hear it well, because people who make a lot of money scalping people when it's SHTF, those people historically and in many situations I've seen and understood and read about, they end up being strung up on, lamp poles, whether during the situation or soon thereafter. They do not do well over the long haul. So, if you're planning to play that role and being a jerk about it, you might want to think about that again. I'm not saying that you need to do whatever with your stuff. I'm not telling you what you need to do with your stuff. I'm just trying to help you think through the implications of the choices that you're making and the comments that maybe you're commenting on. Most of the folks in our comment section are wonderful people, and I'm not mostly talking about this. I see comment sections in other videos and other channels a lot too, and a lot of conversations. But telling everyone to take a hike and letting them know that you have resources is going to make a lot of enemies, and people will get really mad. If you give them a little bit of help, if you give them what you can, and they can see that you're trying to help them and nobody else has helped them, they will remember that too. They will remember that too. When you stand up and say in a community meeting, we can't do that, and they go, when I was struggling, that person helped me. I'm going with him. I'm going with her. For the rest of your life, you will be bound to them at the soul level if you help people in their moment of crisis, whether that's a shoulder to cry on, whether that's advice, whether that's resources, whether that's whatever. You help them in that moment, and you will have a friend for life. You turn them away and do it with arrogance, you may have an enemy for life. That's free advice. I've seen that play out overseas. I've seen that play out in other countries, and I've seen that in a lot of places I've read about and I've visited after the fact. So, God bless you all. Steve Poplar out. Hopefully I gave you something to think about.